Good morning, everybody. So what we're going to do today, we are going to be giving you an overview of iboss. My name is Chris Page. I'm the Channel Technical Manager for iboss covering Europe. So part of my job is to do enablement, build awareness, and tell customers about our product, why we're different, etc., etc. So today is going to be a bit of a mile-high kind of overview. Sometimes it's very difficult to put over into half an hour or an hour's worth of time in terms of who we are and what we do in detail, and that's the kind of thing that we would engage our sales engineers to do demonstrations and things like that as follow-ups to activities such as this. So I'm going to dive into the presentation. If there's any questions, as Asta said, if we can save that till the end, we'll be having a Q&A. If there's any questions based on the materials that I've covered, great. If there's any questions on anything else relating to cloud security, also feel free to ask them as well. So I'm going to turn my camera off because I do a lot of waving around of hands, so I don't want to distract people whilst I'm talking, and I'll turn it back on at the end of the session. Okay, so, just going back. So that is me, that's my contact email address. So please feel free to make a note of that. It will be on the recording, obviously. So if you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to get in touch. Please ask anything, and if I can't answer the question, I'll loop in somebody who can. And that pretty much moves to the housekeeping things that we've done already in terms of asking questions, etc., etc. We'll save that until the end. So in terms, excuse me, in terms of iboss and who are we? Now, I've put together this slide to give you a bit of a whistle-stop tour to tell you some bits and bobs about us. So we've been around for 20 years. So we're a well-established product, a well-established technology, etc., etc. And a few years ago, we changed to iboss in 2012, and there were several reasons for this. But where we actually started was the secure web gateway side of the market. So we built that in America. We had a strong focus around public sector, around education and government, and we actually pivoted to cloud security. So the terms SASE and SSE, we could actually deliver SASE and SSE solutions before SASE and SSE solutions were actually common in the marketplace, and those terms kind of like coined by Gartner. And the reason why we can do that is because of our architecture. And our architecture is the thing which is completely unique to us. And I'm going to be going through that later on in the presentation. But the idea around our platform is we can secure any user, any device on any network to any resource. So whether that resource is a public cloud architecture, whether it's SaaS or IaaS, or whether it's a private resource, so the kind of stuff that you've had on premise and legacy for the past 5, 10, 15, 20 years, we can secure access to that. Now, in terms of securing access to it, we can apply zero trust. So zero trust to all locations, resources, and activities. So no matter what you are doing as a user, you are constantly assessed by zero trust. So what are you doing? When are you doing it? Etc., etc. But we'll come on to that in more detail shortly. We can apply network security. So secure web gateway, DLP, anti-malware, IPS. There's loads more to this list, and I'm hoping everybody knows what these acronyms actually mean. If they don't, please ask. I'm more than happy to answer the questions, but we do way more than what I've actually listed here. This is just a summary of them, other features. We can also deliver advanced security. So the things that you actually need these days to survive and protect your environments in today's world and against today's threats, such as remote browser isolation, optical character recognition, entity and user behavior analytics. So again, I apologize for all the letters everywhere, but we can deliver that from our platform as well. And the way that we deliver it is unique to the market and completely different to everybody else. In terms of our architecture, it is simple, and it is the simplest architecture on the market, and it is dedicated to each customer. So you are not using a pooled resource, you're not using architecture such as AWS or Azure or anything like that. It's completely private and it's yours. Again, this goes back to the differentiators about who we are in our architecture. And in terms of the typical business outcomes, this is 3 that we mentioned commonly. So secure cloud adoption, flexible working, zero trust. But there's loads of other business outcomes that we can give you. So consolidation, cost savings, getting rid of the legacy way of doing stuff, VPNs, appliances, that kind of stuff. So there's lots of benefits to adopting our platform, which go beyond the scope of this presentation. So the next few slides, they're just going to touch on some security challenges that everybody faces to some way, shape or form or some degree. Now, to start off with, the applications have left the building. So it's something that's a phrase that a lot of people use, but we no longer rely on applications being installed on premise. We no longer have a dedicated server that users connect to. They have an application installed on their laptop or their desktop or device. Everything is cloud. So whether it's SaaS applications such as, say, Office 365 or Salesforce, or whether it's infrastructure applications such as AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, or IBM, which I've listed here, they are hosted elsewhere. So what do we actually do about that? And how do you actually secure beyond the physical boundaries, the physical network that you've had for so long? Because on-premise, we've had security solutions for 20 plus years protecting our on-premise environments. But how do they actually shift to the cloud? Because when you look at it, they can't do that. And even if they say they can't do it very well. And now, in terms of malicious actors, malicious actors keep on winning. It's the nature of the game. Now, these figures are taken from a UK report, so I'm not going to quote them. I'm not going to go into detail. But the idea around this slide is just to point out the techniques people are using. So 89% of them start by phishing. And these are the kind of companies that are being attacked and being successfully hacked, or have been recently. And no matter how big you are, you have to come up with a different approach. So the legacy way of doing stuff, the layered way of doing stuff, we've got to come up with a different approach, which moves us over to looking at elements such as zero trust. Now, flexible working. The pandemic caused a huge shift in our working behavior, and it's become the norm. Everybody wants that as part of their contract, especially in the IT industry, especially in cybersecurity. But the thing is, we need to give a secure and consistent user experience. So users need to be able to pick up the device and use it no matter where they are. They can access whatever data they need on whatever network. And it needs to be simple, fluid, and a great user experience. And going back to the legacy way of doing stuff, it would be connecting over VPNs, it will be getting your tokens out, you're checking this, you're authenticating multiple times, etc., etc. So flexible working is great, but if you start to put the obstacles in front of people, which are there and are common, it's not the great experience that it can and should be. And what you also need to think about is you need to be able to access all resources. So whether they are websites, whether they are SaaS services, IaaS services hosted in the cloud, or if they are internal resources, so something that can't be moved to the cloud. So an old SQL server that you have to keep on site for connecting to this specific machine, those kind of examples. How do you actually secure access to all of these resources as well? And the kind of typical example we'd use in this would be something like a hospital. So a hospital would use some like X-rays and CT scanners. They can't be moved to the cloud. So how would you secure access to those on-premise devices that have to be on-premise? But also, with it, we've got to keep things simple. So the architecture that you adopt has got to be simple, and the user experience has got to be simple. Now, taking a bit of a sideline, I'll give you my experience when I use my work laptop. And obviously, working for iboss, we use iboss. And whenever I go anywhere, whether it's in the office, whether I'm on the train, whether I'm sat in Starbucks, whether I'm sat in the car tethered to my phone, the experience is exactly the same. I open my laptop, I connect to the network, and I use it. You can also put in all the necessary security wrappers. So if you wanted to have two-factor authentication, you can do things like Okta and ping identity and things like that. We can do that, no problem at all. But for me, it is a great user experience. Now, moving on from there, legacy architecture. So I've already mentioned this a couple of minutes ago, but legacy architecture actually fails in terms of securing the cloud, because this is what we've had for the past 10, 15, 20, 25 years. I think the VPN has been around for longer than 25 years. So that's how long people have been using these technologies. But what we have at the bottom is we have users and their devices. They connect over VPNs, and they connect back to physical architecture. So they're connecting back to a site or multiple sites, because VPNs can direct traffic to multiple sites to load balance, et cetera, but you're connecting back to a physical site and a VPN appliance. From there, once you've securely connected and punched a hole through the network, which is what the VPN does, you then connect to your on-premise security architecture. Now, this is hardware, software, virtual machines, and every customer, every environment has a different blend of firewalls, web filtering, malware, et cetera. I've just put some examples here. Some of you might have a sandbox, some of you might not. Some of you might have a SIM, some of you might not. So everybody's different. And I've used the different colors here to represent different vendors, because it's always been a layered approach. You'd have one vendor to do one thing, one vendor to do another thing. But the problem is you have to go through the security stack to then go out to the cloud. Oh, sorry, my slide is just, oh, there we go. Sorry, slide just hung a little bit there, sorry. But yes, so you've got to go through this on-premise architecture to get out to the cloud. So whether it's just normal website use, or if you're using things such as Office 365 or AWS or Azure, you've got to use this model. And the pandemic made people realize that in terms of just performance and user experience, this wasn't great, because you were jumping on calls and you were saying, can you turn this off? Can you turn your video off to save bandwidth, et cetera, performance was bad, et cetera. But it's because of this on-premise architecture. An on-premise architecture, as I mentioned earlier, it can't secure cloud and flexible working and the modern requirements of flexible working. In this example, you're pinned to the architecture, you're backhauling traffic over your VPN before you go out to the cloud. So ideally, you want to go to a cloud security solution, which then takes you straight to the cloud. Now, in terms of iboss and how we're different. So this is a very, very similar diagram to the last one. I've just made a few subtle changes. Obviously, there's a bit missing on the right-hand side, but this is where iboss fits in. So what we do is we provide an alternative to the siloed on-premise security model that everyone's had for years. And once customers are on our platform, it's a complete game changer. And this is the typical kind of path a customer would take. So first of all, we get rid of the VPN. So at the bottom of the screen, the VPN is now gone. You no longer need that, because what we do is we redirect traffic from whatever device you are using to the iboss cloud. And with that, we increase flexibility on the endpoint. So there's more endpoints available to you, more operating systems, et cetera, et cetera. We then, the second stage and the second bar up, we don't need on-premise appliances, the on-premise security stack anymore. So the VPN architecture, the secure gateways, this appliance, this virtual machine, that virtual machine, you don't need it. In certain circumstances, customers might like to have a physical appliance. Very, very often this is compliance led, so we can offer that. But our primary route is, well, primary route for customers is 100% cloud. Now, on the second banner, we've got rid of the architecture and all we need is a network connection. So from now, all of the traffic from the device goes through whatever network and gets directed to iboss on the right-hand side of this diagram. Now, once customers are on the platform, you can move, decommission, replace whatever word you want to choose your on-premise security stack, and you can move this to our platform. So just an example here, firewall, web, malware, sandboxing. You can get rid of the on-premise architecture that you've had for years and years and years. And you can get rid of the appliances, you can get rid of the site duplication, you can get rid of the charges associated with it, the hardware contracts, the maintenance contracts, the software, the support, the power, the infrastructure costs, etc. And ultimately, what happens is your siloed on-premise security is no more. You can still have certain things on premise if you need to, by all means. You know, we can adapt to that, it's no problem at all. But ultimately, what happens is iboss replaces the on-premise security stack, and we become the conduit for your security. So your users and devices on the bottom of this diagram, they go through the network is directed to, sorry, your network connection is directed to iboss. The security stack kicks in, so Zero Trust, secure gateway, everything on our platform. And whether you're accessing a private resource, which is in the middle of the diagram here, or a cloud resource at the top of the diagram, everything goes through iboss. Now, we do appreciate we can't do everything. An example would be we can't secure physical endpoint devices. So we have multiple bolt-ons, we have multiple relationships. So as I've listed here, Microsoft Defender, CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, Okta, Splunk. These are, I've just chosen a few logos just to put here, but there's loads more out there. If it was the likes of Okta, we can bolt onto any SAML supported identity and access management solution, no problem at all. Oh, so why iboss? Now, when you actually come onto the iboss platform, excuse me, you have a dedicated architecture. Now, this is what makes us very unique to the market, because a few years ago, our CEO, our CTO, he patented this architecture. So nobody else can repeat it. We are completely unique to the market. And when you're on our platform, it is the same principle of having your own server room. Your own server room has been in your building. It's yours. It's protected, etc., etc. You control it. You are not sharing resources with anybody else. Oh, sorry, just hung there. And when you are on our platform, you get a true zero trust solution. And there's a slide coming up on Zero Trust in a moment, so we'll go into that in a little bit more detail, and a network security stack. And when I say network security stack, there are some examples here, so firewall, web, CASB, sandbox, etc., etc. You can pick and choose what you want via licensing. So we have 3 licensing models, but if there's something that you wanted in particular, such as browser isolation, you could have that as an addition to a base license, for example. So it's a very flexible platform. You pick and choose what you want. Now, once you're actually on the platform, the path of traffic, as I've already mentioned, as soon as you actually go to the last one here, you've got your device at the bottom, you've got your user on the device. It is a single pass of traffic. So traffic hits the platform, it goes through the platform, it's assessed for malware, DLP, etc., etc. Then it goes out to your cloud resource or your on-premise resource. So depending on what you want to access, and it would depend on the layers of the security stack which actually come into effect and how they've actually been configured. But the idea around this is the simple architecture. So we give you one cloud, which is yours. And that cloud can be as small or as large as you need it to be, and wherever you need it to be as well. So if you had certain compliance needs, geographical needs, let's say, or in the UK, if in our healthcare system, they are very keen to keep data in the UK and in UK data centers, we would give them, an iboss cloud in an iboss data center in the UK, and it won't go anywhere else. If you were a multinational, so the likes of ABB or Exxon, who are our customers, they're global multinationals. They might have 20, 30, 40 instances of iboss in different countries, and you can have different policies in each cloud. You can have one reigning across everything, or you can have one specific to one country. So let's say one for the US, one for the UK, one for Germany, all different compliance and data protection kind of standards and regulations. You can fit in with that. But the beauty about it is it's one cloud, as I already mentioned. It can be as big as you need it to be and as complex as you need to make it. You need one agent. So one agent gets installed on your endpoint, and you have one management console. So it is a genuine, true single pane of glass. And the beauty around it is, and I suppose our architecture is like that, is because it's been developed in-house from scratch over 20 years. And there's been no product acquisition, there's been no third parties. We've developed everything in-house. So for example, remote browser isolation, we developed that in 3 months from start to finish. And then it was available on our platform for all customers. There we go. So in terms of Zero Trust, now, Zero Trust is something that has been batted around a lot for the past year or two. And Zero Trust was adopted by the US as an official kind of presidential mandate about 18 months ago. So all public sector and government organizations in America have to adopt a Zero Trust framework. Now, the UK is following suit, and also the EU is following suit. The UK and the EU haven't put something official in place at the moment, but it looks like they're going to be following the model which has come from America, which is this one. So you have your asset and your subject. So your asset is something you use. The subject is typically a user, or it can be something like an API or an automated connection kind of thing. But the idea around it is you are untrusted. So first of all, who you are, no matter what you do, what device you're doing, you are untrusted, and you have to gain a level of trust. And this is where we have a policy enforcement point. So Zero Trust has to have this policy decision and policy enforcement point to say, who are you? What is your device? What is the behavior around you and your device? Have you authenticated, et cetera, et cetera? So basically, are you allowed to access this resource? And then we move on to the resource, which is at the top. So once you've gone through all the checks, you've authenticated, you've used Okta and this, that, and the other, you're trusted, you can then gain access to the resource. So in principle, this model is very simple. So there's three basic requirements: the asset and the subject on the bottom, the policy enforcement point, and the resource. And you've got untrusted zones and implicit trust zones. Now, when you actually start to look at this in more detail, and when you look at all of the solutions out there, they can get very, very complex very, very quickly. And a lot of solutions out there can't actually deliver this simple model. And if they say that they do, they deliver it in an incredibly complex way with multiple components of architecture that can be spread globally, which you have no control with, you're sharing with each other. No, you don't know what you're actually getting. But with iboss, oh, there we go. There we go, just come to the end of this. This is how we operate. And our architecture bolts on, matches, aligns, whatever you want to say, to this zero trust framework. So at the bottom, we have our assets and our subjects, which is our users and our devices. We have the policy enforcement point in the middle, which is your cloud. So your own cloud, no one else's, you're not sharing it. It's not running on AWS in America and in Europe, in the Far East, or in Australasia or APAC or anything like that. It's yours, and you've picked and chosen where that cloud is. And then you're accessing your resources at the top. And the resources are cloud resources and internal resources. So we align to this perfectly. And it's a massive differentiator to our platform. And it goes back to the way our platform has been designed and how it's actually been patented. And when you're actually looking at zero trust solutions, you have to be very, very careful about other factors, because you need your zero trust solution to also bolt on to security. So your secure web gateway, your anti-malware, your DLP, your CASB. So we can also deliver that for you. You've got loads of solutions out there that will say they are zero trust, but they're just looking at the authentication side of things. They can't do anything in terms of security. And then you have to look to another solution for security. So again, complicating the argument. So you have to really think carefully and look carefully into what you're actually investing in terms of cloud security, zero trust, and the platform that you're investing in. Now, when you're actually on our platform, excuse me, this is what it looks like. And I do apologize, but this is the most complicated diagram that you're going to get in this presentation. But the idea around this is just to show you what a typical customer, enterprise customer, could have in their environment if they were to move to iboss. So the bit in the middle is the iboss cloud. So the iboss cloud, as I've already mentioned, that is your own cloud. It can be in a single country. It can be across multiple countries. It's completely up to you. We can also have physical appliances as well. So if you needed to have a physical appliance on site or multiple sites, we can offer that. We also give you a full hybrid solution as well. So the physical appliances and the cloud, they are all managed as one, and they're all managed in the same console. So in terms of configuration, management, reporting, everything, again, it is the genuine single pane of glass. Now, along the bottom here, we've got 3 different user examples. So we've got an on-premise user. So an on-premise user, in this example on the left-hand side, they are going through a physical appliance. So let's say they are a bank, they need to have a physical appliance on site. So that's absolutely fine. All their traffic is redirected through that physical appliance. On the right-hand side, we have a company user, but they are a remote user. So anything that they do, as soon as they turn their device on, their laptop, their tablet, all the traffic is directed to iboss as soon as they get a network connection. So no matter where they are, it's the same user experience. So whether they are in Starbucks or they're working from home, it's exactly the same. And the other example that we have in the middle, in terms of the final use case for this example, is a contractor, a guest, or somebody using a bring your own device or BYOD. And what we can do there is we can give users a remote browser isolation, or a browser isolated session, or RBI. So if they are accessing things such as Salesforce, for example, if you're a sales-led organization, you had a Salesforce consultant come in to do some work, some configuration, some tables, some charts, or whatever, you could give them access via an RBI session, so they can do whatever configuration they need to do, but they can't do anything in terms of uploading data, downloading data. So anything they do within that session is just torn up and it's gone after that session is over. In addition to this, on the right-hand side, I'm just going to wiggle around my cursor to show you where I'm talking about there. On-premise, we can bolt onto enterprise applications, so ERP apps, for example, or a data warehouse. So the example I gave earlier, if it was things like CAT scanners or X-ray machines in hospitals, we can bolt onto that as well. And there's other elements, there's other ways that we can connect to physical environments as well. You don't need to have a iboss physical appliances. There's quite a few methods that we can use to connect up physical locations. But the idea around this is the iboss cloud in the middle, the white banner, it is a single seamless security service edge. So all of your users will be going through one platform, and there is one route out to the cloud and back. So we can deliver private access. When you go out to the cloud from our platform, because the platform is dedicated to you, you get dedicated IP addresses. So you can start to lock down resources, and you can do something called resource anchoring. So you can guarantee traffic going to Office 365 or Azure is coming from your environment. And if anybody else tries to log on with your email address, say to Office 365, it won't even be recognized because you've anchored Office 365 to the IP addresses that become part of your iboss cloud, which again is another unique feature with the iboss platform. Another great benefit to the platform is the changes that you have to make. They are minimal, absolutely minimal. If you wanted to connect up a site and you didn't want to have or you don't need to have a physical appliance, you can just set up an IPsec or a GRE tunnel through your firewall or your existing firewall to the platform. If you wanted to, you could scale back that firewall. So let's say you spent 10,000 euros a year on this firewall, you can scale it back to something that might cost you, say, 1,000 euros. So again, it's multiple cost savings in multiple areas. But the idea around this is to make cloud adoption as simple as possible in terms of cloud architecture, and also adoption in terms of your local network architecture and your users and what gets installed on their endpoints. Because when you look at competing solutions, you can end up with multiple endpoints, you can end up with multiple clouds. It gets very, very complex. It's very, very quickly. Now, in terms of business benefits and takeaways, I can't list all of them. So I've cherry-picked some of them. But if you want to know more, we will be doing follow-up emails. So we'll be sending you some links and whatnot to point you to some of the key resources. But if you want to know anything more about us and our platform, what we can do, we're more than happy to have another conversation on a one-to-one basis. But starting off with costs and complexity savings, I've touched on this multiple times, but you can get rid of the legacy way of doing things. Typically, customers will start off with removing secure gateway appliances and VPNs, but you can start to replace other things. So DLP, IPS. So there's multiple things that you can get rid of, and appliances, VMs, and the costs associated with them. And it's streamlining the architecture and removing multiple costs. So why should you pay for 10 different individual security solutions when you could pay for one? So the total cost of ownership, return on investment can be absolutely brilliant. You can enhance your security stance, enhance your capabilities. So again, apologies for all of the letters and acronyms on this part here, but you can consolidate multiple solutions. So Zero Trust, antivirus, anti-malware, secure web gateway, firewall, you can bolting them all together onto a single platform, which is what you have to do when you move to the cloud. You have to consolidate. You can't have one cloud solution doing this and one cloud solution doing that, because you're transferring the same problem of having on-premise security to the cloud. And also, you can't do it. Vendors don't offer those solutions where you pick a firewall for one, secure gateway for another. It's just not there. Another great thing you can do is enhance your existing capabilities. So I know from experience, I've been in IT security for many, many years. Lots of customers, might not have network DLP, network IPS, a sandbox, CASB, for various reasons. It might be they're too complex, might be they're too expensive. Well, they're on our platform. So if you buy the corresponding license, they are there for you to just turn on, configure whenever you want to. So they are there. And if at a later date, there's an additional function which comes along, let's say in 6 months or a year or 18 months, it might be available as a bolt-on, or it probably would be available as a bolt-on. You can bolt it onto your platform if you see the value in it. And just some examples in terms of the bolt-ons is things such as RBI, so remote browser isolation, optical character recognition, and exact data match. So the platform is incredibly flexible. And again, it is one platform. You're not bolting on something such as RBI, and RBI is based in the USA. It's a separate architecture, and it doesn't mold well with the existing architecture that you've got. iboss doesn't work like that. It's all one cloud platform and it's yours. Securing cloud access and flexible working. So moving on from the last point in terms of enhancing capabilities, I suppose the last 2 points, you can use secure web gateway, you can use CASB, you can use the firewall side of things to monitor and adapt to cloud usage and adoption. So you can see sanctioned IT, unsanctioned IT, you can see what users are doing on a moment-by-moment basis in real time. So if users are doing something, let's say they're file sharing here, there, and everywhere, you can be alerted on that and you can do something about it. In terms of the flexible working, you can get rid of the VPN architecture, you can get rid of all the complexities, so it's any user, any device in any location. And also you're keeping control of the attack surface, because iboss is your route out to the world. So in terms of cloud access and cloud security and your private resources, it's also the point where you're controlling the attack surface, and no matter what happens, every single activity is assessed by Zero Trust. So if I was to access Salesforce 1 second, Office 365 the next, go to a website, all of those transactions, all of those clicks that I do, those URLs that I type in, or the hyperlinks that I touch and click on, they are all assessed on an individual basis. And if any one of those are suspect, the Zero Trust part of iboss comes into effect, kills access, and won't entertain it anymore. So it stops it in its tracks, and it stops the proliferation across the network. So if there's one suspect URL and I had Salesforce open, the two will definitely not meet on the iboss platform. And in terms of compliance, now, this is a really big thing for me personally, because compliance is batted around a lot. And everybody, all the vendors, we talk about compliance, we can help with compliance, but when you actually look at how it works with architecture, it can be a very, very complex beast. Now, I've already touched on this a couple of times already, but if we use, say, Germany as an example, Germany have very, very strict data protection laws, keeping data within the German country kind of thing, German data centers. This is where iboss excels, because you get a dedicated cloud, you get to decide where your cloud is located. It's all highly available, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll have There's multiple locations in each country. So if one location goes down, it fails over. So you don't need to worry about that. But also there's no shared capacity. So you're not on AWS, you're not on Azure, and you're not competing for resources. So it's not like you've got Coca-Cola and Pepsi on the same platform kind of thing. All of your capacity is dedicated, so is your network, and so is your storage. And also in terms of data processing, data retention, and physical appliances, we can give that to you as well. So in terms of retention, you decide as a customer how long you want to retain data on our platform, which can be a year, it can be 6 years, it can be 10 years. It's completely up to you. You determine that. And also we give you the option of the physical appliances as well. So if you need to have them on site, we can give that to you. It's it's 100% hybrid architecture, single console, same management console, same reporting, etc., etc. So these are just a few of the benefits that we can bring in. As I say, I've just cherry picked a few of them. Oh, sorry, the slides are. Okay, so what we'll do, we will move on to questions. So that's it for the presentation. I hope it made sense to everybody out there. We have got some stuff on chat and Q&A. So.
Yes, thank you, Chris, for an interesting presentation. So yes,
you're very welcome. Very welcome.
We already got a few questions. So would you like to read by yourself, or should I read?
Actually, what I will do,
Okay.
have a look at Q&A here. Okay.
I see the first one is from Arnoldas, who is thankful for sharing of video recordings. So thank you, Arnoldas. Good to know that you see this valuable in case you can't participate or you would like to rewatch these webinars. Thank you.
Okay, right. So what I'll do, I'll turn my camera back on so you can see me. I'll start waving my hands about. Okay, so future sharing of the recording. Yes, everybody will be getting a sharing of this recording. We'll also send you other links to resources as well, so don't worry about that. So when I'm talking about big clients, so Exxon, you mentioned multiple instances of iboss. So does the price increase 10%? Right. Okay, so with the platform, the more you need, the more you buy, obviously. And it's more a question for, I suppose it's more of an answer from a commercial side of things. But yes, the more you want in more countries, then yes, you would buy. So you typically pay for an instance per country. So if there was one in the UK, yes, you'd pay for that. There's one in the US, you'd pay for that. There's one in Germany, there's one in Australia. Yes, you would be paying for those instances, yes. But then you've got the instance charges and the license as well. So you'd have, let's say if it was a 10,000 user license, that would stay at 10,000 users, and then you'd have your different instances dotted around. So depending on how many instances you want to buy on a global basis, then yes, that would influence the cost. I think what we'll do on that one, we'll put a bit of an answer together in a bit more detail. So if, Francesca's on the call as well. So she's our channel manager in EMEA, who looks after Hermitage. So she can probably give a far more eloquent answer on an email than what I can. Okay, so next slide. Next question. Are you saying that endpoint machines don't have to have a VPN to connect to the cloud? Okay, so yes, you no longer need the VPN, so you can get rid of it completely. And how does it look like in terms of the user experience? Right, so the user experience, I'll give you a user experience from my personal experience. Before I worked at iboss, I worked from home. I'd worked from home for years, and all of the experience was you get your laptop, you get your VPN, you have your phone, you get your token, etc., etc. When I came to iboss, it was there's your laptop, off you go. And whenever I open my laptop, when I'm at home, I'm in a coffee shop, and I like doing this when I'm on the train, because whenever I open it, I just open open my laptop, get onto the Wi-Fi on the train and use it. You don't need to go through VPNs, authentication, all that kind of stuff. It completely removes that process. And it's the in-office experience. So whether I'm working in our office in London, I'm working from home, I'm working on the train, the experience is exactly the same. Now, what you can do is you can put different wrappers around. So let different security layers around if you need to. So for example, next week I'm going to Ireland to do an event. So it could be the case that all of a sudden they see, right, Chris is no longer in the UK. He's no longer pointing to the UK data center. He's pointing to the one in Ireland, or he's gone to the one over into the States, depending on how we've got it configured. Now, if he's in this other country, what we're going to do, we're going to ask for him to authenticate over Okta to access a certain resource. So you can start to tweak your levels of access. Also, in addition, if you wanted to have, and this is a great feature which is unique to our platform, if you wanted to have SAML authentication around legacy resources, we can do that as well. So you can have it around cloud resources such as, say, Okta, Salesforce. But if you were in a hospital and you had a CAT scanner or a CT scanner or whatever, you could prompt users to authenticate to that via our platform. So it's very, very, very clever. But if you wanted to see that in more detail, yes, we can arrange a demo and we can show you the other features such as RBI and what that looks like as well. Okay, next question. Okay. So this is from, right. Several resources, so ServiceNow, Office 365 and CRM in the cloud that I wish to publish via iboss. I understand this is the easy part. Okay. At the same time, I have 50 services, file share, SQL, payroll app in your own data center. And you don't want these services exposed to the internet, but I need my users to be able to access those services from everywhere. Okay, so yes, that can be achieved, no problem at all. So depending on your location can depend on what resources you actually access. So if we had the situation, the diagrams, the slides I showed you earlier, you've got iboss in the cloud and you're using iboss for everything. So iboss is there in the middle, you've got the cloud at the top and you've got your internal resources on the side. So if you don't want it to be exposed to the internet, no problem at all. If you're an internal user, you'll be directed through iboss straight to that internal resource. And that internal resource can be connected via an IPsec, a GRE tunnel. We've got a network connector that we can install on site as well. Or if you go to the stage where you have a physical appliance on site as well, the connection would go through that. So they can be accessed from they can be accessed by internal users, no problem at all. If you don't want them accessing externally, not a problem. If you did want them accessing externally, you've got the elements of Zero Trust. So the entity and the user behavior analytics. So who am I? What have I been doing? What's my device been doing? How's that been behaving, et cetera, to protect you if you did want to do that, if you did want to introduce that layer of flexibility. But file share, SQL, RDP, SSH, we just see them as resources. So no matter what you want to access, whether it's internal, whether it's in the cloud, when we're building our Zero Trust policies out, it is, what is it? Just put it down as a resource and off we go. And if we haven't, in the remote chance we haven't got it listed in our vast dictionaries, you can just create it yourself. It's not a problem. Okay. So let's say I'm an IT services developer company with 20 people. Would iboss be suitable and cost effective for this? As a bonus, I'd like the possibility to connect my customer environment seamlessly. So iboss is, it is, I suppose, but a good way of putting it is it's an enterprise solution. And when we get down beyond a certain price break, the cost effectiveness of smaller users, such as 20 users, I suppose becomes a bit difficult for us because we've got the architecture, the setup costs, which we have to pass on to the user. And whether you are, let's say, you're 50 users or you're 500 or 750 users, you'd still need that same core architecture. So that would be, sorry, that was my dog, sorry. So that would be 2 iboss gateways in a HA configuration and a reporting and management node as well. So everybody has that as a baseline. I know I mentioned Exxon. I don't know about their architecture. They might have 100, they might have 200, I don't know. But yeah, it does, for smaller companies, it can become, I suppose, a bit pricey per user in this instance with 20 people because of the infrastructure setup costs. You know, we can only do so much. And the way that the platform has been designed, it's to onboard a certain minimum amount of users, if you get what I mean. Okay. Right. There's no more questions. Hopefully I've answered those sufficiently for everybody. Is there anything in chat as well? Let's just drag my lower screen.
I see one more question.
Oh,
in terms of architecture, why is iboss the only vendor to meet the zero trust requirement?
So right, hold on. We will go back. Can you still see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So going back to zero trust and how we actually meet it. I mean, our architecture has been kept incredibly simple. And this is how we actually meet the requirements for zero trust. Now, this slide here, this is taken from the NIST standard, which the American government has adopted. And as I say, the UK government, which I know it's not relevant to a lot of the audience, the UK government is following very closely alongside this. And it looks like the EU are doing the same. And the UK and EU they are dragging their heels a little bit in terms of, you know, the pace of what the US has set. But when you actually look at cloud security architecture, and when you are talking to vendors around SASE, SSE, and zero trust, the architecture is absolutely critical to your success. It's got to be simple, it's got to be straightforward, and it's got to fit into a model like this. Now, iboss does that. I've already explained that, and hopefully I did a good job of explaining it. But when you draw a parallel to the competition, they struggle to offer this model, this design, because we have the patents around this. And it comes down to the containerized architecture. Now, if it was a competitor, and I'm not going to name names, I'm not going to vendor bash or anything like that. That's not the aim of today. But competitor A, you might have 5 clouds. First one is zero trust. Second one is secure gateway. Then you've got CASB. Then you've got DLP. Then you've got RBI, for example. All 5 of those clouds can be in different countries, spread globally. So you've not only got the problem of all these 5 different clouds and potentially 5 different architectures. So one could be on Azure, 2 could be on AWS. Sorry, I had to think then. One could be private, and the last one, like the way of controlling my fingers, one could be on IBM, for example. So you've got all these different architectures as well. So geographical distribution, you've got different architectures. You've also got architectures that are being shared. So once you're on a competitor's platform, it could be the case where you've got Coke sharing with Pepsi on the same architecture, on the same platform. You're sharing the compute, the networking, the storage, the data retention, the data processing, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a very, very complicated, or potentially very, very complicated architecture once you pop the bonnet of the car, but you've got to look into it in detail. And Peter and Paul, who are our CEO and CTO, they had the foresight to patent this architecture around containerization. And the simplest way that I can put containerization is, you've had your server room on premise for the past 10, 15, 20 years. It's your baby, it's your security stack, everything's in there, your data, everything else. We've just changed its location. That's all we've done. So we can give you all that security, all that peace of mind, everything else in a containerized architecture in your choice of location. And it's this simple architecture that we deliver. Do we have any others? I'm just conscious of time because we're just about to tick over the hour.
We still have 1 or 2 minutes, so let me check.
Okay.
How does iboss help with compliance standards such as GDPR?
So touched on this kind of already, and hold on, we will go to down to the end of the business benefits. So first of all, it's dedicated architecture, so it's yours. So the point I've just mentioned around moving your server room to a different location, it's yours. Now, you'll get lots of solutions saying they can help. I'm sorry for doing that. They will help with compliance, but what does help actually mean? Because when you look at things such as GDPR, you're talking about data residency, data processing, data retention. I don't confess to be a GDPR expert at all, but there are all these things to think about. Now, the previous company I used to work for, who again will remain nameless, they sold a cloud security solution, a SASE solution. But when customers came onto the cloud, when they invested and moved onto the cloud, there were a couple of elements that were in the USA. So immediately they said, well, because of GDPR, we can't use that. So we bought parts of a solution that we can't actually use. Great. So there's lots of things to think about when you move to the cloud, but the containerization of it and you choosing your data center, your data location really, really ties in with what you want to achieve with GDPR, because everybody for so long has been focused with GDPR on site in your server rooms. You need to think about it going to the cloud. And if we give you that dedicated architecture, there's way less things for you to, I suppose, have to worry about, so to speak. Okay, any others? There's no more on the Q&A screen here.
Probably the last one, as I see, what would be the typical components installed in the iboss architecture?
So let me just go back in the right direction. So the typical situation, the typical environment, customers tend to go 100% cloud. We only have certain customers with certain compliance requirements who need physical appliances. So the situation that you get on this slide is the one basically, it's a blended between the one on the left and the one on the right. So we've got the on-premise user and we've got the remote users, but in both instances, the on-premise user and the remote user, they are being directed through iboss. Sorry, patch management, that has never popped up. Let's just get rid of that, sorry. There we go, sorry about that. Oh. So what customers do, they, as I already mentioned, they get rid of certain components to start off with, their VPN, their secure web gateway, and then they move into the iboss platform. We appreciate that it's not going to be, on Monday, it's not there. On Tuesday, everything moves to iboss. It can be a phased migration. So you can have split tunneling of VPNs. You can have configurations where you only access cloud resources through iboss, and you can still keep your legacy VPN in place just to tide you over until you fully move over to the iboss platform. But ultimately, I'm going to go back onto point. So the typical situation is 100% cloud, so you've got the white banner in the middle of here. You've got your cloud, and whether how big or small, however many instances, whether it's one instance in the UK or you've got multiple instances globally. The on-prem users, you see the remote company users, sorry, I'm just at the top of my laptop screen. They're all directed to the cloud. So the iboss platform, and then we go out to the cloud or internal resources. And those internal resources, so the on-prem stuff that you can't move to the cloud, we can either have a network connector, which is a small virtual machine which gets installed on site. If you don't have capacity on site for a VPN, so for a VM, virtual machine, you can set up a connection by basically a tunnel connection from your existing architecture to the iboss cloud. Because ultimately everyone's still going to have a firewall on site. You can scale that firewall back because you're going to be tunneling all the traffic to iboss, but you're still going to have some firewalling capability. So those are the key components, to be honest. And you can bolt on additional relationships. So there's multiple Microsoft relationships. There's a new relationship with CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, etc., etc. So you can take advantage of all the products that you've also got and invested in. So it's not a case of iboss is going to sit there and do everything. We can share capabilities and share functionality with other third parties. Okay, hope that answers the question. Is that, Astrid, is that the last one?
Let me check, but yes, I don't see any more questions.
Okay.
Thank you, Chris. So to conclude, we hope that this webinar was helpful and interesting. And as we mentioned, please contact us in case you would like to get to know more. You can see our contacts in the Q&A section. Thank you, Chris, once again, and have a good day.
You're very welcome.
Bye.
Yeah. Thank you all. Have a good day.
Bye.